5:30. We'll call the meeting to order. Reading of the district's mission statement. Our district will empower learning, energize achievement, and enhance community excellence without excuse. Are there any additional items on the agenda? Before the agenda. If not, do we have an approval of the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
That's Kelly Heitkamp. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And that's Tim Elke. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Recognition of visitors in open forum. We don't have any today. Reports and presentations. Superintendent report.
Thank you. Just a couple quick things, and then I'll take any questions that you do have. Just because in our last meeting, we had about an hour and a half presentation on reopening schools, so hopefully that answered a lot of questions. A couple things that I wanted to update you on. Funding, you heard in the governor's announcement at the end of July that we're going to give more funding to schools for added costs. So we found out last week it's about an additional $150,000 for schools that has to be spent by December 30th. Thank you. That has to be spent by December 30th, and we're still trying to figure out what we can actually code to there. There is additional cost, but what it'll actually pay for. Teaching and learning, we're still trying to figure out and work with our staff on students, especially if you're a high school teacher. You have kids that are in person or students that are in person. You have students who are at home on those 2 days that they're not in school, and then you have a third group of students who are at home that chose full-time distance learning. And how we can make that seamless and not overburden, teachers having to teach 3 different groups and how that actually looks. So I would say there's still more work to be done with the teaching and learning. I know Mr. Hansen and Mr. Erler have been working with their staffs and will continue working with their staffs. Especially since next week we front-loaded some PDA as part of your adoption of the school calendar. So we actually, instead of just having the 4 normal days of teacher workshop days, we have an additional 2 starting next week as well. We're continuing to look at staffing. As I told you before, we had some para, whether it be retirements or resignations last year, and we didn't intentionally fill those because we didn't know what this school year was going to bring. And so they've started some interview process last week, and so we'll continue to look at staffing. We have a meeting tomorrow of how we can meet our student needs and work with their staffing. And then if you haven't seen throughout their building, and I did want to just show this, this was the type of branding Mr. Hansen has done. So you'll see a lot of our preparedness logo or our operations, and these are already on the floor. We custom made them with backs that stick to the floor. So you'll see this type of branding throughout our building, or masking when you come into the building. That Mr. Hansen just has gone above and beyond, and I think his kids cut them out for floor markings, but you'll see this all over. That's all that I wanted to share on the superintendent report. I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Have we seen, or even around in the different districts, changing of personnel, teachers moving around, or has this year kind of been everybody staying put?
This year we've had to fill 2 teaching positions, which seems really low. Anything else?
I've got one more. Is there gonna be like a mass police or anything like that going around in school? If kids aren't abiding or people aren't wearing them?
Yeah, well, you'll see the masking policy is on the agenda later, but as of course, I'm guessing you've had questions from community members, and I've had some questions myself from parents. We are going to follow the executive order, and there's a couple options for kids. There's 3 options. You wear the mask as required by state law or executive order, or you have a doctor's note, saying here's the reasons why they can't wear a mask, whatever their conditions are, we'll take whatever medical experts give us that, or the third option is that they have distance learning. And there's really no 4th option. It's not, I just don't want to, or I don't feel like it. We're going to follow the state mandate with those three options, and that's exactly what's written in the policy.
Are they allowed to wear the face shield instead of a mask?
The question was, are they allowed to wear a face shield? And there's certain situations where they can wear a face shield. And it's actually spelled out in there too, that face shields aren't necessarily a replacement of face coverings. These face coverings are still the number one, and then there's certain situations where you can wear a face shield and with medical documentation.
Okay, so those are the medical ones more, so.
And I just seen where, on the news last week, where they said the gaiters, or what, are not protective. It's not really a protective mask. So, just kind of an FYI, I don't know if we have to do more research on that, but that's what I heard on one of those morning shows from CDC, I thought it came from, so. Just FYI.
Yep.
That is one of the allowed policy.
Yeah, it is allowed. It's in the policy.
It is, and so this policy directly came from MSBA, and which they have their lawyers look at it and directly align with the executive order, so.
But don't you think that all this COVID stuff is changing, right? One policy today might be a different policy next month.
I'd agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So Kurt, did we ever, with all the families replying back in, whether they're doing distance learning or coming in, was there 2 classes in the elementary that we're possibly gonna have space issues with? Did we ever get that figured out yet?
Yeah, I think those space issues have worked themselves out with the number of students choosing distance learning.
Okay,
We do have one grade where we're still trying to figure out how it fits. But like I said, that meeting is occurring tomorrow, just about nailing down what our staffing is.
okay.
Do we have an estimate of when families will know who their kids will have for teachers and like class supplies and stuff that?
So class supply lists are posted already.
So
The
those
question
are
was,
definite.
which groups, I imagine for high school, if you're the blue or silver group, when that's gonna be posted, and I know they were just in Infinite Campus today for Janice and Grant for a webinar and trying to make sure and place kids already. So I'm guessing as soon as possible, whether it's this Thursday or next Monday, but I know they're working on it.
What
And that
about
would be
the
same-
elementary?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, elementary too, their teachers.
Oh, elementary class list?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are after we figure out this exact staffing and how this is gonna look, my guess is it's gonna come at the end of this week or early next week.
So you don't anticipate any class supply changes for the families based on who they have for a teacher or anything, right?
I don't,
Okay.
but with everything this year, it's at this time I don't, and who knows in 2 weeks. Yeah, what has to change.
What are we at for students that are deciding to do distance learning?
Yeah, we are probably higher than other districts. From what I've heard reported, we're at about 13.5%, 14% of our students choosing distance learning.
What's that equate to?
About 90, I guess you could say, somewhere in there, 85. And I've called families who, we've had actually a good portion of students open enroll into our school or move into our district, and we've had some students leave, so I made about, 10 calls last week. Some of them just moved, of course, and there's been other various reasons, but I'm following up on those students that have not choosing to enroll at JWP.
Have you seen a lot of people or students go strictly to homeschool?
Minimal, I would say less than 5, as of now.
Any other questions? Okay. Strategic plan update.
Looking at the wrong agenda.
Oh,
Okay.
We're good. Strategic plan. Again, you're gonna see this multiple times. It's not ready to be adopted yet, and just wanted to point out the idea that we took out the word empower all and made it its own focus area. And the way to empower our staff and students is through SEL and a social emotional curriculum and that culture and learning. So that's probably a change for what you've seen in the past. It used to be embedded, that social emotional learning used to be embedded in the supportive environment. And if I back it up one step, I think Katie and Laura both serve on one of these groups, but remember we have a supportive environment group which consists of staff, students, and parents, as well as unique learning experiences and life adventure. The next phase that we're working on is that the supportive environment had some great ideas about connections, whether it be student to student within a grade, or between our high school and elementary students. So our next step is to bring in our students and our student councils and figure out what exactly an action step looks like and what they want to accomplish. So some of those details are getting worked out, and I think when we get into September, this might be on the agenda for a final vote, but it's definitely going to be in final draft form at that time if it's not.
Any questions? Okay. Activities Committee report.
Anybody want it?
Pull it up.
Yep.
Our notes.
Yeah, yep. Great.
Yeah, I would just say we went over a lot of stuff. Were all the documents shared with the other group members, or is it just who's on the committee?
These are all highlighted, so yes, they can access them.
So I would suggest if you have some questions or interest in them to take a look, but these are the items we went through, the MOU, activities handbook. A couple big things with that was the eligibility guidelines and the emphasis on leadership and also captain selection were some of the major changes in there. Talked about cross-country guidelines, just, shortened season, how the meets are gonna be run and stuff like that. There's still some unknowns as well. No sixth graders because of the numbers. I think, Mr. Lickey said we already had 22 students through JWP, and what was the number for?
18.
There's total was 18, ended up coming from, well, yep. So a big group for cross-country. Fall coaching season, basically I think we said we have one coach hired at this point, right? And we were
Cross-country.
cross-country. And now that we have some knowledge of what's going on with the other seasons with practices and stuff, we'll be going ahead and hiring those coaches. And we talked about the pay as well, and we will not charge for the practices this season. We'll pay the coaches, we'll not charge for fees for practices this season, like football practice and baseball practice and track practices that can go on.
There's only a certain amount of practices they can have.
Yep.
So no fees at all going into any of those?
Not for the practices.
Not until the
Cross-country
actual,
there is, but-
until
Yep.
season.
Until the season starts,
Until
then
the
there'll be a
season
fee.
starts.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
So
We're not
like,
raising fees
so like the
either.
football and
For changing.
volleyball that are gonna have practices this fall, but then hopefully their seasons in the winter, spring,
Mhm.
their,
Right.
if they have their seasons, their contract salaries are the same, they're,
Yeah, so what was that? The coaches were getting paid some up front, right?
Yeah, I can real quick explain it, because again, this is an agenda item for later, but.
okay, well, we can discuss it.
No,
later,
but it
sure.
was on this one, and we discussed it
Good.
before. So again, we wanted to be fair to our coaches and to give our student athletes as many opportunities as we can. So here's what we've said, is that if I was a volleyball, football, baseball, softball, track and field coach, if I was any of them, and I'm just doing practices right now, it's not a mandatory that you have to do practices, because maybe they had a different job and they just weren't able to get out of it. So we didn't feel like we could make it a mandatory thing. We are gonna incentivize it by paying them part of their regular salary, but it's not going to be mandatory. So for instance, I'll take the examples, if I was a softball coach, I have 3 weeks of practices that are available to me now, and I might have, it doesn't matter, 10 weeks in the spring for softball. If I choose not to do any coaching right now, that's fine. We're not gonna pay you for it, but you're still gonna have the opportunity to receive full pay if you have all 10 weeks next season. in the spring. So if we have it and we make it all 10 weeks, great, we'll pay you 100% of your salary. If there's only 8 weeks next season, then it's 8/10 of your salary. And that's different. If I was a softball coach and I said, yeah, I want to coach these 3 weeks right now, and I want to do the, whatever I said, 10 later, then your denominator is going to be 13. So this year, or this fall, after you complete those 3 weeks, we'll pay you for 3/13 of your salary, because we're going to incentivize that. And I think you're banking on, then hopefully there's another season to earn your other part of your salary, which who knows what the circumstances will be. So we're not gonna go above our contracts that are already agreed upon, but that's how we're gonna prorate it.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So
And
what's
then
the,
there's not gonna be any late fees for athletic fees, because they may not know until last minute if there's a season. Some people have reached out about using the football field for practice. Stuff like that so far. Might have some more.
For-
other schools?
Other districts, yes, to use it, you know, if theirs isn't being. if
Well,
theirs
we
isn't
had
ready.
some discussions about that too, about doing that. What are we going to do? Are we charging them the regular fee that we were going to, like if it was the MSHSL?
Well, this board voted last year, I believe it's $200 and whatever it
Yeah.
is an hour for an outside organization, outside of our district. to
Yep,
come
and that's what I'm asking. We
So,
would, if
yep.
they want to, we would charge them that, and they have to work around our time periods. Okay.
And will we be looking at this differently come March? Because our football field might be a hot commodity come March, that we need to maybe look at the different fee change possibly in that point in time.
I'd probably say you'd have to talk to Ryan too, because if
Yep.
schools are already asking about it and he's providing them, here's what the cost would be, to then come February say, well, now it's $500.
I think that's gotta be something that we have to look at due to the snow possibility and everything else.
Well, I think if there's snow, they just don't get to use it.
I think we should look at that contract and maybe we look at that wording now, because an event is, they may want to hold practices there, right, versus an event. So that-
And we do signify in the policy the change, but.
I certainly wouldn't sign any agreement with anybody when it comes to March and February. We can give them pricing, but I certainly wouldn't sign any agreement with any school district at this point in time until we get closer to those dates.
I'll bring that back for a work session, just to make sure we review it.
I think that's about it.
What's 5C, the junior high sports ball season?
I think that just means the junior high coaches, right?
No, they follow the same seasons, because technically they could do their seasons when they normally are, because they're not governed the same way junior
Got
high
it.
is.
Oh.
But
Okay.
we've decided to keep them with the sports when they're
Okay.
supposed to go this year.
That makes sense. Okay, any other questions? Thank you. All right, anybody want to pull anything out of the consent agenda or ask any clarifying questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
That's Tim Johnson, do we have a second?
I'll make a second.
That's Kelly Heitkamp, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Old business, approval of policy 613 with substantial changes. Do we have a motion to approve policy 613 graduation requirements?
Make a motion to approve policy 613 with substantial changes, noticing that they are revised and will be at, if you want, you can contact the district office upon approval.
That's Kelly Heitkamp. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Tim Burke. Any discussion? Or, yeah, do you have anything else to add? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. 8B, 2020-2021 superintendent goals. Do you want an approval on this one?
I think so, yes.
I would.
That's what I was thinking, but wasn't sure. Do you want to discuss anything before we entertain a motion?
I can just, give you a 1-minute overview. Again, I think last time there was 6 goals, and Laura and I have worked on these and met last week. And when you look at, I think curriculum instruction was one of them that isn't on this new one, but it technically is, because a lot of it falls under the strategic plan, which is the first goal. And so it's basically approving that and making sure we execute on the action steps, which in and of itself is many goals. You could probably consider that one. The second one is budget, and we've talked about that, just about my growth, but yet there's still more room to grow on the fiscal side of operating a school district and working with Matt. And this year, it's probably even vitally important that we're probably gonna have budget revisions for you and figuring out where to spend these CARES Act dollars and the other funding streams. So that's one of the second goal, and then the third goal just revolves around the student input and ensuring that I am not only listening to our staff and community members, but also listening to our students and making sure that they're involved. So, and I know Laura and I have talked, and she was the one to bring that up last year, and I think it was a good goal area, so.
Anybody have any questions, concerns, comments? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion to approve the 2020-2021 superintendent goals.
Make a motion to approve the 2020 and 2021 superintendent goals.
And that's Kelly Heitkamp. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
That's Tim Johnson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. New business, approved JWP school district handbooks. And I suppose we have to go down each one of these, huh?
Not
Right.
necessarily.
No, that can
Yeah.
be all one?
Mhm.
Okay.
Just gotta make the proper motion.
Okay. All right, do you want to talk about any of them before we?
No, I would just, as always, there's been some changes, and I know if you looked at the student family handbook, and I talked to Laura about this today, again, there's an addendum that's referred to, a COVID addendum, and that's not in there because we're still trying to work it out and figuring out the different protocols that we're gonna have, whether it be students entering our building in the mornings or screening and some other things that we wanna give to our families. So that is still coming, and then I would just wanna highlight again the work that Andrea Kronbach, Community Ed Director, has done in school age care, Kids Corner, and that stuff, and so that you'll see some handbooks on here that weren't on here before, just.
Any other questions or anything? All right, do we have a motion to approve the JWP school district handbooks, student family handbook, staff handbook, activities handbook, substitute handbook, parent SAC/WA handbook, and Kids Corner parent handbook?
Make a motion to approve item 9A, approve JWP school district handbooks that go through item 1 through 6 of 9A.
That's Kelly Heitkamp. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Tim Elke. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. All right, next one, approved school age care, wraparound care, and substitute rates for the 2021 school year. Do you have any discussion on that, Kurt?
I don't.
Anybody have any questions or anything?
So how do our rates compare? Because I know a couple years ago, Kelly Heitkamp, you can probably remember, we went through this maybe 3 years ago and raised our substitute rates to try to get closer to some of the bigger schools, and we found out it really didn't make a difference because they liked the security of being able, they could work 4 or 5 days a week at the bigger schools, where here it was more sporadic. So what are we looking at, like, you know, how are we compared to other districts?
So, yeah, with this, we're probably, $10 or $15 higher, because I think we were at $130 before for a teacher sub rate, and, based upon last, work sessions, conversation about potentially going higher, which we did a little bit, but we didn't want to make it excessively high, because then the next year when COVID isn't around, then we would have to drop it by, a decent amount back down. So we thought, we're recommending a $20 increase just in our substitute pay as a little bit of an incentive, but also a little bit of an increase as other sub-positions have increased. So we're probably, just like I said, I think 130 is probably around average around here, so we're probably a little bit above.
Which, due to the virus, might make it tangible, but have we, and I know, have we ever thought of just hiring, and I know we have one for the teachers possibly that are going on maternity leave, but have we ever thought about just hiring an additional teacher to just be on staff, knowing that there's going to be a substitute for each and every day?
Yes, we've talked about it, and we've already met once, and again, that's the sort of the staffing human resources meeting that we're having tomorrow with the principals and community ed director, because again, we want to create as much flexibility as we can, and we're also financial stewards of the district's money, so we don't, we can foresee potentially having a staff, but I just feel like if we hire somebody and we're in distance learning within X amount of days or X amount of months,
True.
then we're end up paying a position for the rest of the year that we really don't need. So it's really a balancing act that we're going to try and find tomorrow. And plus, sort of my strategy going in, or our strategy going into it, is that there's so many unknowns. So part of me would not like to do that until we are a couple weeks into this school year to see exactly how this is going to look and what our needs are. But the bottom line is that we might have some teachers or staff who might have to self-quarantine for 14 days more often, in which we're going to require more subs. So that is out there that we need to have a plan for. But
So yeah, on the flip side of that, have we reached out to the substitutes currently or from last year and asked if they're, available, planning on coming back?
Yes, I believe Wendy has done that. And we've, like I said, had some actually reach out to us saying, I just want to sub in one district and want to be at JWP. So we are in the middle of finalizing that.
Good.
And I didn't mean to throw you a curveball. My nephew actually just got hired in South Dakota for full-time substitute, but South Dakota is going to school Monday through Friday, every grade, so.
So do we, at this point, do we know how many potential staff members may not be? Because I know we've kind of talked, and with the HIPAA laws, you can't mention, but do we have an idea of it's going to be 2 teachers that are not coming in, or is it going to be 2 pairs, or none, or?
Yeah, yes, I do have a number, and yes, we're working through the process. So just want to make sure we're all on the same page. He's talking about reasonable accommodations based upon the ADA. And so part of it is filling out a form and getting medical documentation. So that's what we shared with our staff. It was probably 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago right now. And so now we're in the process of what they call interactive process meetings. So we're just meeting with the employee who has requested an accommodation and saying, well, how would it look if we provided you this accommodation? Some of you need to telework or whatever it is, but what happens if we provide you this? So all of them are uniqueness. There's been no final decisions that have been made on those.
When do we, I guess my question is when is a decision going to be made? Because I don't know how, if the teacher is going to be, let's say it's a teacher, and they can't come in for whatever reason, how are they going to teach from home when you're going to have students in here in the classroom? And I know you guys have thought about, but I don't know, I'm trying to also know what's going on,
Yeah.
sorta, and so.
So we're hoping by the end of this week, we've got the majority or all of them done. Although, no matter if you're in the COVID world or the world of just normal life, you can always turn in an accommodation form with medical documentation.
Mhm.
Saying, I need this accommodation because of some health thing. So yes, we want to get these done in a timely manner, but a manner that's well thought out, because we have to, again, overlay how many students are gonna be in our building, what the spaces of our building, what our staff needs in it, and how many kids at home. Say, for instance, we have I'm just saying it, a hypothetical, we have a special education para who has a request to work at home. Then we have to think about, oh, how many special education students do we have that need services at home that can be delivered in that model? Do we have enough? Yes or no? And then can we make that accommodation? So there's so many moving parts that's, again, the reason for the staffing meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve school age care, wraparound care, and substitute rates for the 2021 school year?
So moved.
That's Tim Johnson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Tim Burke. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. All right, resolution adoption of learning scenario for 2021 school year. Want to talk about that at all?
I can, and again, this came from MSBA where we filled in, this is basically what you're voting on, that the hybrid model is our base learning model for this school year, is what we're starting in. And while this might be a big issue in other districts, the way that we have it set up where pre-K through grade 7 is in every day, it doesn't, it's not that big of an issue because we're still giving them everyday in-person learning or that option available, 8th through 12th grades on a rotational schedule.
In this, we don't have to go back every time you have to change this, right? At the end, it said that.
Yep, and then you're just giving me authorization that we may have to change learning models throughout the year. And as Sonia has said to our staff meetings, and I don't know if she said this at our last work session, you know, we receive county data every Thursday, but more than likely, we're gonna see some trends before that data. We might see, oh, this classroom had, whether it be 2 or 3 sick kids with symptoms of COVID, or it was 2 or 3 actually confirmed cases that we might say we need to self-quarantine that group or that classroom or that grade level, however it turns out to be, before we actually see the data that shows up 2 weeks later.
Will there be, let's say a kid has to quarantine, I don't know how many times throughout a year, you know, are those taken away as, you know, their number of years or days that they have to be in school, you know, to move classes? Does that make sense?
No. Is your question,
Attendance?
we have to
Attendance.
hold people
Should
back?
use attendance.
No, because again, attendance this year is sort of different in the fact of attendance before is you actually had to be in your seat in order to be counted for attendance. Well, attendance this year is different based upon the state, you know, return to school guidelines by saying, you know, those people in distance learning, those 2 days a week, we can still count them as long as they complete some activities and, you know, do our requirements. So no, it's gonna be a little bit messier with attendance this year.
That does bring up a question though, are we expecting them to be distance learning those 14 days if they're quarantined? If they're not the sick ones, I don't know.
Yeah, we would definitely offer it, yes. That would be the hope and expectation.
So and this kind of goes into it, but with the learning scenario, we're still on Wednesdays having time for people to go to, from my understanding, for release time for religion release. Is that how we're doing our schedule?
I think we heard back from them and they're not offering it. They're offering it a different way besides on Wednesday mornings.
So our Monday through Friday schedules will be the same?
Yes.
Okay, because I guess my question would be, how do you do contact tracing if we're gonna allow them out of the building to go somewhere? And so, okay, so that I don't have to worry about it.
So if a teacher gets COVID and let's say, I don't know if they are out for 2-4 weeks, if it's like the second grade teacher, does the other second grade teacher kind of pass on the curriculum to a substitute, or how does that work?
Yep, this is where our employee processes would come in. Based upon the Coronavirus Relief Act, if I was a staff member and I either got it or was required to self-quarantine for 10 days, I've got 10 days of paid sick leave that I don't have to use my sick leave for if I need it. So the question comes in, if you're really sick, then use that. If you're not sick and we can allow you to telework by, Skype or Google Meeting into your classroom, and we'd figure out a way to have somebody else do that, you won't have to use your sick leave, and we might have to have somebody staff it, or at least supervise it while you're doing the instruction and meeting with kids. So I think it's a couple different scenarios. We want to make sure, though, if our staff is sick, they're taking time off if they're not here, and they don't have to feel like they have to telework. But it's different if they're asked to self-quarantine because they're a close contact, and they still want to be able to telework.
So if they're really sick, some people get hit pretty hard with it.
Yeah.
Do
So.
they have to have curriculum 2 weeks in advance already prepared? If that, I don't know, like
Yeah,
what
we
normal
would
is
just
as far as.
probably rely on other grade level or content area teachers to help us plan and execute.
Any other questions? Okay, so this is a resolution. Do we have a motion to adopt the learning scenario for 2020, 2021?
Make a motion to have a resolution vote for the adoption of the learning scenario for 2020, 2021 at JWP.
And that's Kelly Heitkamp. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
That's Tim Elke. Wendy, you're on.
Cahill,
Yes.
Elke,
Yes.
Spice,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
I couldn't hear that.
Yes.
Thank you. Burke,
Yes.
Heitkamp,
Yep.
Johnson.
Yes.
All right. Motion carries 7-0.
Yes.
Next one, letter of agreement addressing compensation of coaches and co-curricular advisors during the 2020-2021 school year. That's what he talked about before.
The only thing I'll add is this was approved by the union, so you'll see signatures from our president and past president on there.
Is this an approval one too?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, do we have a motion to approve the letter of agreement?
I'll make a motion to approve the letter of agreement.
That's Tim Elke. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Tim Burke. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. E, approve policy 808, COVID-19 face covering policy. Do you want to explain how the emergency one works?
Yeah, again, the emergency one is, this can only be enacted for a year then, and then it becomes ineffective. So it's not going through the normal 3 reading process.
Any questions on this? Okay, if not, do we have a motion to approve the policy 808?
I'll make a motion to approve policy 808.
That's Tim Elke. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
That's Tim Johnson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. F, approval of policies for 10, 13, 14, 15, 506, 14, 22, 24, 616, and 806 for annual review. Oh, wait, we took out
I know,
522.
yeah.
Sorry.
Good.
522 is not in there. Do we have any questions on that? Or do you want anything to talk about other than, I think you mentioned it at our last meeting. All right, do we have a motion to approve those policies?
So moved.
That's Kendra. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Tim Burke. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. G, this is the first reading of policy with substantial changes. This is where 522 is, Title IX sex non-discrimination policy, grievance procedure and process. And I know you've been trained, you and Wendy and Ryan have been trained. You want to speak a little bit of what the big changes are?
Yeah, there's new federal guidelines, so this it actually was supposed to be enacted with school districts like August 14th, I believe. Yes, is when the federal law takes into effect. And I think I just got this policy late last week, from MSBA. And so thought it was pertinent enough that we should get it on the agenda for the first reading. There's different roles. Ryan Lidke is our Title IX coordinator, which we today put a section as mandated by the federal law, that we have to have a Title IX coordinator listed on our website and other information. So I think all school districts are, starting to comply with this. But basically, if we receive a sexual harassment complaint or a sexual complaint, then there's a process that you go through. There's people who are identified as the investigators that find the information. There's the decision maker. And so it's making sure that we've got enough people who have been trained in those roles.
Any questions? All right. Next one, approval of policy 422 with no substantial changes. Do we have any discussion on that?
Again, the only change was MSBA recommended we include this policy 522 in the new one to this.
And basically, this means that it's for both employees and students.
Yes.
And not making duplicate policies, right?
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve policy 422?
I'll make a motion to approve policy 422.
That's Tim Johnson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Tim Burke. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. All right. Upcoming meetings, September 21st is the regular meeting, followed by activities meeting. You're still having that?
We'll see. It's on the calendar. I know we
Okay.
moved this one up because of new things, so we'll see.
Right, okay. October 5th, study session followed by finance meeting, and October 19th, regular meeting. And we are adjourned at 6:11.